I'm really happy to have this opportunity to meet and speak with Bob Cirino. Bob, thank you so much for taking time out of your day today. Can you tell me a little bit about what your day is looking like so far? What have you gotten up to this morning?
Oh, what a prescient question. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. Appreciate it, Todd. Your guests are beautiful beings, so it's an honor for me to be amongst your list of folks. This morning we just finished a yoga teacher training,
Oh
so
man, congratulations.
so I'm just like I'm just overwhelmed with love right now for the beauty of the people who show up to dedicate their lives to living compassionately. So we've wrapped that up maybe 2 hours ago, did a
Wow.
little practice, and here I am. So that was
Mm,
my morning.
very cool. How long have you been offering teacher training?
Hmm. Well, we've been training teachers at the Yoga Studies Institute since since COVID. That's when we kind of opened up the nonprofit. It existed before that, but it kind of became a sleeping giant. So then we reawoken it. So 2020 is the first time we put out a pretty sincere training on a lineage called Lady Naguma. And we recently turned that into a 200 and 300 hour training. In total, it's over 1,000 hours of training if you go through the whole lineage. But getting it certified and registered with Yoga Alliance is a bit of a process. So yeah, we've been doing that for a couple years now.
Nice. Well, then let me back up a little bit and find out when you say we,
Hmm.
do you have a yoga studio
Uh,
or is
no,
this an
so
online platform?
yeah.
Got
So
it.
the Yoga Studies Institute. So I direct a nonprofit called the Yoga Studies Institute, and our mission is to teach the classic literature and methods of yoga. So we go through the Yoga Sutra, Hatha Yoga Pradipika, Bhagavad Gita, and then we go through a couple really sweet lineages, and we teach that. So when I say we, it's all the great instructors that make up the Yoga Studies Institute. And we're international, so a lot of our audience is in China, Russia, Vietnam, Japan, Mexico, Singapore, and of course, the United States. So
Wow.
we run programs internationally online. And then we have localized distributors who help to translate and kind of naturalize the content to fit the culture of whoever the people we're serving is. And so when I say we, it's kind of the core team of instructors and administrators, and then our beautiful community of distributors and students worldwide.
Wow. Are you the founder and or the person behind this idea?
No, the founder is his name is Geshe Michael Roach. So he has been teaching Buddhism and yoga for, I don't know, like decades and decades. And he was the founder of the Yoga Studies Institute. And then, like I said, it kind of fell asleep. And me personally, I wasn't really into yoga in the way that yoga was originally presented to me. I fell in love with meditation, and I heard that one of the presentations of yoga is that it prepares your body and your mind for meditation. So I said, if you try to sit still for half an hour and your body's not prepared for it, it's kind of hard to stay focused. And so I said, okay, I've always been an athlete, but let me train myself in something that's specifically designed for what's become the sweetest practice of my life, which is meditation. And so I got a book called How Yoga Works. Felt like it was a good book just on the title. And
Okay.
it was written by Geshe Michael Roach. And I
Wow.
read it, and I consider that to be my first yoga teacher. And it was about prana, and it was about breath, and it was about how our mind and our prana run together as one. And just really going into the sweet depths of the multi-dimensional idea and practice of yoga. So I was just practicing that, and at the back of the book it said yogastudiesinstitute.org, and when I went to the website, nothing was there.
Mm.
And so long story short, I heard that they were going to teach the Yoga Sutra again, which was a text that I tried to learn, but it's kind of hard. And so I said, okay, if they're teaching it again, I loved the book. I loved the teaching. So let me see if I can help. So I started by volunteering, and I was glad to hear that it was reawakening. And then, another long story short, I ended up becoming director of the nonprofit, and stopped doing the other things I was doing and just went full on into teaching compassionate wisdom through yoga.
Wow. Cool, Bob. That's amazing. That's really cool. So
It's been it's been a journey, Todd.
I hear you.
Yeah.
That's a neat little timeline there in relation to your first yoga book is the same teacher that you're now able to work alongside. That's an honor. That's always really cool when that works out. I remember what was my first yoga book? The first yoga book I ever saw, I was in between 11th and 12th grade,
Mm,
and I found Be Here Now by Ram Dass,
mm.
and I was like, "Whoa, what is this?" Have you perused that book?
No, but I've listened to many of his teachings.
Yeah. And but I never had the pleasure of meeting Ram Dass. So I like
Mm.
if that opening of that book had then turned into now I'm a director with Ram Dass, I'd be like, holy cow, what a crazy turn of events. So that's amazing that
Mm.
you kind of that connection just happened
It's very sweet.
kind
Yeah.
of quickly like that, or just in that way. Can you give me a little bit of backstory and history on how did you come into meditation practice? What was your intro into your world of meditation?
Hmm. That's a difficult question to answer. Because I think that in the moment, there's like, I'm making a decision to begin meditating, but I think that, at least in the way that I've experienced my yoga, is that, when we look back in our life, we see how every single moment is something that brought us to here. And so how can we say when it started?
Mm,
uh, so the first thing that comes to mind
good
is
point. That's a great
my
point.
my parents taught me values. They are very value oriented people. And I think that like one of the essences of meditation is keeping our core values present. And, that's the object that we're fixing our mind on. Um, and so I think that that was, one of the primordial experiences. And then I've just always had a penchant toward understanding mind. I just thought that this mind is just unbelievably powerful and mysterious. And so I spent a lot of high school, especially, um, getting into all kinds of lineages and traditions, trying to describe the nature of consciousness and the nature of mind.
Mm,
And I got into Napoleon Hill, who wrote Think and Grow Rich, who is, wow, that's somebody who understands mind. And I started my life started to change extremely rapidly after I had touched that text, because the methods I think were really beautiful. Um, but I think what gave me the platform before that was when I was 18, I went and worked on a permaculture farm in Costa Rica.
oh,
And it was this beautiful farm. I love permaculture. Like before anything, I'm a gardener. You know what I mean? Like I belong in the soil. That's where you'll find me playing a guitar in the dirt in my garden. And so I was on a permaculture farm, and I just went into the library, and one of the books in the library was an introduction to Buddhism. And I said, yeah, why not? Apparently these folks are really into mind, and I like that kind of thing. And so it was the first time that there was a methodology to meditation that was like really not formal in like a sterile sense, but formal as in like I can follow these instructions and there's a path.
mm,
And so I had these nice moments meditating like in the sunrise in my little hut, in Costa Rica. And then one morning I had a meditative experience that just was absolutely indescribable and ecstatic and infinite, and and just totally blew my context of reality out of the water. And I then endeavored for years and years to try to find anybody who could explain, because an intro to Buddhism wasn't necessarily explicit enough around what I experienced.
mm, good
So
point.
then I so then I found after, I don't know, 5 years and trying different traditions and methods, I found this meditation called the Lion's Dance by Master Asanga, who lived around 200 AD. And a friend of mine said, who was a meditator, he said, "Hey, I think you're going to like this." And he gave it to me. And I was able to reliably return to that state of precognitive awareness that was infinite and expansive on a reliable basis. There was steps, and not only was it relieving to feel that there were steps, but there was even further to go. And the explanation was so exquisite and precise. I said, "Oh my gosh, this is wonderful." So that's how I got into meditation.
Mm.
So then I said, "Why do we have this meditation? Because I've never heard of it before." It's like kind of, if I Google it, I don't find it. And that's how I really connected with the Asian Legacy Library, which is this nonprofit that has digitized, I think, like 3.5 million pages of Eastern philosophy texts. And so one of the meditations that they digitized and preserved, because these scriptures are written on palm fronds that are just decaying in caves for any number of geopolitical reasons or just cultural reasons. People are afraid that authorities might take them or something like that. So this nonprofit for 35 years has been going and digitizing all of these ancient manuscripts and making them available for free for everybody online. And so I said, I have to help these people because the most precious jewel from my meditation practice is a cultivation of compassion and stillness. And so I said, this is what the world needs. So I said, how can I help? And I started volunteering. And then, when I look at all these kind of like, I don't know, miraculous things that's been in my path of meditation and yoga, they've been catalyzed from acts of service where I just felt my heart sing and I listened to the song and I danced and I served. So yeah, that's a little bit of my meditation journey.
Wow, Bob. That's so cool. I'm so excited to meet another permaculture
Yeah.
enthusiast. That's incredible. I took a similar route at age 18 after finishing high school. I started traveling with the organization Willing Workers on Organic Farms, WOOF.
Yeah, I was a woofer.
Yeah, me too. And
That's
I ended up traveling and woofing in Connecticut,
awesome.
California, Hawaii, Italy, and Australia. And then when I got
Mm,
to Australia, I ended up staying there for 5 years and working on and taking permaculture design courses in Mullaney at Crystal Waters with like Max Lindegger and some of these like old school classic people that were all originally with Walton
amazing.
and that whole group because it seemed to, at that point in my life apparent to me that for me self-sufficiency was important and I really longed to somehow have a little bit closer connection to my food source. And then
Mm.
as I started researching organic farming, permaculture has popped up because it was like a food forest, like
Yeah.
imitating nature in its,
Mm,
forms and not trying to create a monocultural situation, but one where everything benefits off
mm.
of another. And so when you said permaculture, I don't
Yeah,
know
man.
many people that are into it. You know what I mean? It's gaining popularity, but
Sure, sure.
it's not like on the forefront of people's,
Well,
consciousness.
and I really think that yoga is an epitome of permaculture, truly. Like the fourth chapter, I think it's the third verse, fourth chapter of the Yoga Sutra says, we must become as gardeners. When
Mm,
we're talking about cultivating ourself, cultivating our world. And I think that permaculture is such an it's this beautiful contrast of observation and action, of
mm,
passivity and activity.
mm,
And then you let the wisdom of nature appear, and you're a student of the wisdom that's ubiquitous. It's in every single thing. It's all around us. And if we try to place our, I don't know, our pride or our ego or our self-centeredness, then that ecosystem will wither. And so, I think that there's just so many rich analogies, and I don't talk to very many permaculturalists either,
I know.
but I'm like, so one of my startups was the Biochar company. I don't know if you've ever heard of Biochar, Todd.
Biochart?
Biochar, biological charcoal.
No. I'm writing it down because everything you've been saying,
Yeah.
I'm going to check out all these different things you're talking about. Biological charcoal.
Yeah.
Help me out. Fill me in.
Yeah. So this is something I was extremely passionate about, and we had a startup. Richard Branson put out a $25 million Virgin Earth challenge for the first company to have a business model that at scale would sequester a gigaton of carbon. And of the 11 finalists, we were one of the finalists with
No
this
way.
technology called
What?
Biochar. But here's
Wow.
what's amazing about it, and it's just like yoga. This technology is ancient. So what biochar is it's charcoal that's been created under a very specific set of conditions, one might call tapas. That then the product that comes out of that, a high temperature, low oxygen, the product that comes out of that when it's put in the soil increases basically all metrics of fertility. If you think about like what happens in a Brita filter with your activated carbon, it can grab all the stuff out of the water. With activated carbon, it's going to hold that, but it doesn't give it back, which is a good idea because I don't want to drink it. With biochar, it has a similar kind of quality, but it'll give it back. And so when we think about the soil environment and we think about what are called cations, which are positively charged ions like ammonia, which is a nitrogen source, or potassium, which is a really important thing for plants, those ions will zorb onto the surface of biochar waiting for a plant to pop out a hydrogen proton or a little bit of acidity to knock it off the biochar and then absorb it into its root. So what you find is the fertility that you put in the soil stays in the soil instead of washing out with rain events. So then the surface of biochar is extremely high surface area. 1 gram of most biochars has more surface area than a tennis court. So something that's absolutely tiny. So think about all of that chemistry potential on this huge porous surface area. So it's a sponge of water, it's a sponge of nutrients, and then of course it's a sponge of life because where water and nutrients are, life follows. So biochar was discovered, even though it occurs every time a lightning strike, creates the fertile Great Plains because of all this charcoal that's being deposited in the soil in this really high temperature fire event, or you'll find it in like coniferous forests where the forest fires are part of the healthy ecosystem. You find a layer of black, and that layer of black is extremely productive. And so all this occurred, and you might be familiar with 1491. It's a book about what the Amazon was like pre-Columbus. Um,
I have not read that.
yeah. So
I'll check it
anyway,
out. I'll
there,
go
there's
there.
this idea, and it's maybe 20 years ago people thought it was a little crazy, but I think it's gaining a lot more momentum. That the Amazon was a cultivated rainforest. Like and the Mayans did this also, by the way, with
Ooh,
their Chinampa system, and
whoa.
they worked on a 200. It was called Milpa. It was like a 200 and I'm not going to get the number right, but like 250-year cycle that was intergenerational for cultivating rainforests and their environment that was productive for food and fiber. It was permaculture. And
Whoa.
so in the Amazon, they started waking up to this idea of the Amazon being a cultivated environment, not this like totally wild thing. It was actually the wildness of man combining with the intellect of man, combining with the power of nature to create. So the way that they started seeing this is by helicopter. They saw these huge, dense places of vegetation that were way more dense than adjacent jungle. So they dropped in and they said, "What's different about this?" Because the geometry of them looked human made. It didn't look like natural pattern. It looked like a human pattern. And they found that the soil was black. And I don't know if you spend much time in jungles, but the soil is usually like red or some kind of really dense clay. All of the fertility in a jungle is held in the biomass because things degrade so rapidly. And so they found this black, tilthy, very easy to crumble soil that was way more fertile than the adjacent soil. And they said, what's the X factor? The X factor was charcoal. So they found that in the Amazonian basin, part of this like cultivation of the Amazon was this practice of combining food scraps with pottery shards and intentionally created charcoal. So then our company was the first company to make that a retail product and a B2B product for large scale farmers as a way to increase fertility and then it's a carbon sequestration technique, because the best carbon sequestration technology we have in the world, if we want to get carbon out of the air and put it in the ground, there's this really incredible technology that's been under R&D for billions of years, and it's called photosynthesis. Okay. So, you know what I mean? So what happens is it takes the CO2 out of the air through the energy of the sun, converts that into a sugar. That sugar then is converted into the plant material, and then biochar fixes that plant material into a charcoal that won't degrade for hundreds to thousands of years. So we have this carbon pump just putting carbon into the soil in a way that's going to make it fertile for generations to come. So um, the reason I brought up biochar is because I have been educating people on biochar for, a long time. And what I found was that there was a common denominator between people who gave a darn and the people who fell asleep when I'm trying to tell them something that feels really important to me.
Yeah.
And it was compassion. If someone has no compassion, then why are they caring about tomorrow's world? You
Mm.
know, and so what
Ooh,
I
yeah.
realized is
Yeah.
I don't know if I need to educate carbon as much
Uh-huh.
as I need to educate compassion. Because if we really understand ahimsa, if we really understanding empathy and exchanging ourself with others and equanimity, upeksha, of course we're going to take care of this planet. Of course we're going to adopt not just biochar, but a multitude of things that are generative as opposed to degenerative. And so that's why I went full throttle into teaching yoga and meditation, because in my experience, that's been the most catalytic thing to cultivate compassion so that things like permaculture will have wider adoption.
Wow. Holy cow, Bob.
It's
I mean,
interesting.
I'm blown away, man. I'm blown away. Number one, I have to ask, what type of education did you have post high school? Beyond
um,
beyond the educate, maybe you're self-trained, like maybe your interest went straight like, let me understand this. Let me read, let me study. Or do you have a background in chemistry or something? Because
yeah,
the way that you're
yeah.
explaining this seems like my PhD chemist friend, who I got a chance to live with for a while, and he was brilliant like you are.
Chemistry's
And but he
poetry, man. I'll tell you
and he was
what.
a chemistry, a
Chemistry's
doctor in
poetry.
chemistry, and he blew my mind with his ideas and the type of stuff he was trying to create. He had this whole thing with he was using horse and cow manure in these enclosed environments, trying to speed up the process to be able to break down like poison. He just had
Whoa.
he did these experiments where he would take these like different like poisons that we like mercury. How can I put it in a contained environment
Oh, it's
with
smart. Yeah.
microbiology? And you're talking the way he talks. And
Well,
it's making me think you have to have a chemistry background, do you?
well, what I love about what you just said, Todd, I'm gonna go into microbiology just for a hair, because
Please.
one of the things that Costa Rica taught me, it was the first time I was in a jungle, is this, like, life wants to live. That's one of my mantras, life wants to live. You know, if we just create conditions, then life wants to live. Um, because you'll find in the jungle, every single opportunity that life has to live, it will. And that thrust of vibrance and thriving, and but also the endurance to endure through difficult, like, life wants to live, and that is part of us. And I think that, my definite chief aim in life is to harmonize man with nature. And I previously was saying, how am I going to do that? And it's through science, through chemistry, through microbiology. Yeah, that was my path. But then I learned the third verse of the Yoga Sutra, Tadas drashtuhu svarupe vastanam. Like, on that day, when we achieve the state of yoga, then the seer will come to dwell in their true nature. And I said, wow, nature isn't just this biological thing.
Mm.
My first expansion was nature being a biological thing to nature being even abiotic or non-biological things. But then yoga was like, you really want to understand nature? Boy, oh boy, hang on tight. We're going to go for a ride. And I was like, wow, like, revealing the true nature is the ultimate harmonization of man with nature, is to be in union with that truest essence of ourselves. So originally, I started doing university research at the University of Delaware when I was a junior in high school. I was doing really, I don't know, nerdy stuff called confocal microscopy of calcium ions in fungi in the growing tips of mycelia. And so I was
Wait,
working
wait, wait, wait,
under.
whoa, 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 whoa. So you were in,
You don't want to ask.
no, no, no. I won't go too far down that track, but as a junior in high school, you were going to the university
Yeah.
and starting research at the university level at the high school level because you were
Well,
that.
I have a passion for science because I have a
Wow.
passion
And I
for
can feel it. I
curiosity.
feel it. Yeah. But that's mind blowing that you're in
Yeah.
11th grade and you're like, wait, wait, I got to hurry up here and get into the university style of research. And then just say that one more time, that combination of words that you shared with me,
Yeah.
us.
So it's confocal microscopy. Confocal, that's a type of microscopy. Um, I won't go into. It's a really, really, really interesting methodology
Okay.
of calcium ions in the growing tip of the roots of fungus, essentially. So I started there. I got there because I was doing research in what are called action potentials between bone cells and neurons to help to understand why bone cancer is so painful. What can we do to make bone cancer less painful? And there's a novel, really cool thing that I got plugged into was looking at. We only think of our neurons as something that can communicate something like pain, but there's really cool research that Dr. Boggs was doing and Dr. Duncan were doing at the University of Delaware that was proving that bone cells also had the same mechanism of communicating information as neurons. And so that gives us an entirely novel pathway for medicine to help make it less painful. Uh, and I love that. I used to volunteer on an ambulance as an EMT. I did that in high school too.
Wow.
And so I love the body. I think it's
So
interesting, but
in high school, you volunteered to work on ambulances?
yeah,
Dude, wow, man, you're
because
blowing my mind today. This is incredible.
and
I
so
mean, most high schoolers are just like gaming and I mean, I don't want to underappreciate what high schoolers are going through. Most high schoolers we're mixed up in our hormones and we're just
I
like,
mean, it's not that I wasn't, Todd. Let's be very
yeah,
clear.
yeah, all that was happening too, but you also
Yeah.
decided, let me go. I'm curious about being on an ambulance. Let me volunteer. And they let you volunteer. So what, they saw you and they thought, who is this kid? Like why is he so eager? That's incredible, Bob. You got to keep going. I want to interrupt you, but it's every now and again I got to pause just because
Sure.
I'm blown away. But keep going.
And I really, like I said in the beginning, it's my parents. Like
Yeah,
I
I see
owe
now. I see.
I I know that I'm lucky. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
my parents really taught me service from the very beginning.
get it.
They were like the greatest thing you could ever do is serve. That's the highest ideal. And
Yeah,
so I really appreciate them. And so, my dad got me a microscope when I was, I think, like 8 years old, because he's a scientist. Well, he used to be an engineer, and he just really fostered my love of curiosity. And my mom had a garden, and so now we can kind of see how these things are coming together.
yes,
My
yeah.
mom's a physical therapist, so she likes to
Oh,
heal people, and
wow.
so and
That's
I love thrill. Like that was one of my. I have one tattoo on my body, and it's epinephrine because I spent a lot of my life thrill seeking, until my wife helped me understand the value of self-preservation. And then what I found is that the most exhilarating thing that you could ever experience is the depths of meditation. And then that's, in my opinion, is far supreme as to anything that you could do
whoa.
otherwise.
Yes.
Being enthralled in a beautiful text also is as exciting as cliff jumping. That's
Yeah.
what I've learned. So yeah, so I was doing the research in the action potentials of osteocytes and looking at how they communicate to neurons. And then from there, I was like, I really like fungus because I love fungus. And fungus is the membrane between life and death in the natural world. And fungus is much more like an animal cell. Like the kingdom of fungi is more like an animal cell than is a plant cell. So there's this and it's like, I don't know, I feel that they're magical and they're the great, if you look at how nutrients and water are delegated throughout an ecosystem, it's actually the fungus that is primarily helping to direct they're the orchestras of our ecosystems. So I think that that's fascinating. And Paul Stamets, Dr. Stamets, he's the one who really opened my eyes to that. So then, I went to my PI, my principal investigator, and I was like, I want to do all this, but with fungus. Does that exist? And they're like, so strange that you ask. There's one of the world's leading scientists of that right there. Like
No way.
right at the Delaware Biotechnology Institute. And so let me make an introduction. And so Dr. Kirk Zimick, I mean, he's a bodhisattva, he'll never hear this, so he won't hear me say that. But he's truly a really special being who loved the world, and he just taught. He gave me a lot of opportunities, and I'm really appreciative for that. So that's how I got into the fungal microscopy, and then I went to University of Delaware to continue my research. Published some papers, got some grants as a freshman, and I was doing a double major in chemistry and biology with a minor in biochemistry.
Wow.
So that because I thought biology is everything above the soil. Um, sorry, I did a minor in soil science. Sorry, it was biology and soil science with a minor in biochemistry. So biology is everything above the ground, and then soil science is everything below the ground, and the language that they communicate with is biochemistry. And so I wanted to get the whole picture. So that's why I pursued that. But what I found out, Todd, is I was doing all this research and I was teaching myself a lot. Um, and I was like, gosh, we have all the solutions already, Todd.
Mm,
I was like, we don't got to figure more stuff out. We
mm,
just have to implement.
mm-hmm.
And that was like a very stark realization. And I was like, I'm in the wrong place. I
Ooh,
have to be an activator, not a researcher.
wow.
And so then I got into startups and I started up a couple businesses, and one of them was with the Biochar company doing that kind of stuff, and so that was really great. And then I ended up dropping out of university because that wasn't my path anymore. Um, I did I and I realized the power that you can do by finding good teachers and having like a appetite for self learning, because I was taking a 600 level biochem class, and I learned the biochemical pathway that I taught myself as a senior in high school. And I was like, oh, I don't need to be here,
Mm.
So
All
if
right.
if this is not my path, then why am I
Yes.
here? So then I dropped out and started up businesses and lived in the Dominican Republic for 18 months, doing a really cool conservation development where we took all these eco technologies and integrated them into a conservation development of a pristine valley in the Dominican Republic. And the thesis was development doesn't mean destruction. In fact, we can have conservation and development, which are often people put at odds. We can do them in a way that's affirming. The old idea of conservation is separating man from nature and saying, don't touch this. But the destruction of the environment is not an environmental issue, it's a cultural issue. And so we have to integrate man into the healing of nature. So instead of man being a problem, can we see humankind? And when I say man, I mean humankind, I apologize. Can humankind, because we were the offenders, can we also be the catalyst that can quickly heal this thing? And I think the answer is yes.
I think so too.
Yeah.
Oh, man. I just have to say that I'm so impressed. You're an
Todd,
incredible.
you're too generous.
No, honestly, I mean, I really admire your your curiosity and your path and the way you describe that. And I really think what you're onto is truly what is needed. You're right. Like, I mean, you're to get to that level of education and then to have that much writing on it and then to actually see which direction you need to go and then be okay with turning directions because you put so much we put so much of our lives into I'm going to achieve this goal and then you get so far down that track that you think well I might as well finish I've gotten
Mhm.
this far but then to have that ability to turn and say, I'm going to go this way now. And maybe it's not a turn. Maybe it's a continuation in the direction you actually feel you have to go. But that's not always an easy decision for us. Would you agree? Like I can't, maybe it was in that moment for you because you had an enlightening moment of like, I need to now focus on people being able to actually implement
Hmm.
what we're going on. And there is sometimes maybe a disconnect in terms of the intellect, because if we over intellectualize, we almost get further away from the practicality of how do I implement this in my daily life. But what you're doing now with meditation and educating people the ability to, like you said, open up to compassion, because then if that's there, I
Hmm.
can now actually be in a space where I can take this information and actually apply it. That's really cool, man. I mean, that is just next level, like seeing into the future. I mean, I'm just so happy to have this chance to meet you and
Likewise,
to have
likewise.
our listeners, to have you listening right now, to meet Bob, and now we're going to follow you and just see what kind of cool stuff, how we can get involved. Like what can we do to kind of further your mission together, as a community. I think to have someone like you that has this sort of insight and curiosity and the intellectual knowledge to back it up, not just an idea. I mean, you're doing hard work, or work that a lot of us are like, that's too hard for me. My brain can't even, hopefully you're all, you know what I'm saying? Like that might seem really challenging. So, okay, well, I got more questions for you. The next question I have then, and I'll be really curious to see where your mind is at on this, is that the other day, my daughter, she's 11,
Oh,
she said, her name is Priya. She said,
oh.
she's like, Dad, I was out in the front and I was pulling weeds, quote, weed.
Mm,
She's like,
hmm.
Dad, what makes a weed a weed? Why are you not just letting that plant grow?
Yeah.
And I said, well, I want these other plants to grow. And if I make space for these other plants to grow, that's why I'm determining in my own mind that this is a weed. But then from a place where we don't have, without name or form, why is a weed a weed? So I just want to hear your take on, is there such a thing as a weed? And is a weed a man made concept?
Thank you so much for that question, Todd. I love that question. As a gardener and especially a permaculturalist, that's a very good question to ask.
I'm just gonna hit one little pause to add one little extra thing, and so we can
Mm,
keep the connection between gardening and or
yeah.
soil and everything, and the meditation world, because
Mm,
then in our minds we might think that thought is a weed, and then we try to eliminate and then
mm.
plant the thoughts that we want. And I'd also like to hear your thoughts if you've made a connection between mental weeds and plant weeds. Okay, now I'll be quiet and let you talk.
No, I love the question. I mean, and it's I feel like I can't even answer this question without talking about what yoga has to offer us as far as a framework to understand our perception of the world. And um and I think that, it's answered, at least in my opinion, in that third verse, or actually in the second verse of the Yoga Sutra. Master Patanjali, the author of the Yoga Sutra, did not waste his time. He said, "I'm going to review for your yoga. Y'all ready? Cool. Here it is." I mean, it's done in the second verse, and then everything after that is if you didn't catch it. So yoga chitta vritti nirodha, right? So yoga, and the my favorite translation. There's lots of translations. My favorite one is yoga is stopping the way the mind turns things around. So chitta vritti. So vritti comes into English and like, oh, that's very weird. Weird is like virt or inverted or vertical. It's to twist something. Or vire, it comes from virt. And so we're twisting our chitta, our mind. And so what does that mean? In essence, the way that I've come to understand it, the way that my teachers have taught me, and the tradition that I've been taught is that what we're doing is we're thinking that the weed is a weed from its own side. We look at a weed and we say that weed is a weed independent of my perception of it. But that's a wrong way of looking at things. That's avidya. That's wrong vision. That's the wrong view. what yoga teaches us, and you can catch this in the stillness of meditation, and that's why we meditate, so that you can see this occur. You can see this occur in real time, and then you'll never misunderstand it again in the stillness of the highest forms of samadhi. Is that the weed is not coming from the weed at us. The weed is coming from us to the weed. And that is a radical idea, right? So let's play this out, because I think this is a really, really crux point of the methodology and the philosophy of yoga. Is so a human walks up and they say, "Oh man, that's a weed. Get rid of it." And then a cow walks up and a cow goes, "Oh, lunch. Love that, man. What a great thing." And so what is it? Is it the great thing that you want to keep and cultivate, or is it the bad thing that you want to rip out and get rid of? What is it? So when the human and the cow are looking at the weed at the same time, what is that object? Can one thing be two things at the same time? Inherently, it cannot, because one thing can't be two things at the same time. That's just not possible. It is a thing. That is what it is. And so now if it's not a thing from its own side, let's take this opposite experience, which is, instead of the human and the cow walking in, let's imagine the human and the cow walking away. What is that thing? What is that thing before there is a being to perceive it and make it a thing? It's empty. It's pure potential. It's a thing before a thing. It's a precognized potential. It's the lack of anything, so that it can become a thing when we perceive it. And so, the ultimate nature of reality, the swarupa, the true form, or the self form, the self nature of a thing, is that it has a lack of any qualities or characteristics inherent to it. There's no objective reality. The only objective reality is a lack of an objective reality. So then when we look at, our partner, right? And we say that partner's a weed, or, oh, that partner's tomatoes. I love tomatoes. What is making our partner a weed versus a tomato is not our partner. It's our perception of them that makes them that thing. And we say, well, what's the real reality? As well, who's gonna report, right? And so this ultimate reality is the lack of any kind of objective reality before perception. So then the next question you have to ask is, well, why is it a weed to us, and why is it something amazing and delicious to a cow? So if something is empty, we can think of it as an analogy of like a movie screen. Before a projector projects onto a movie screen, the movie screen is blank. It's pure potential. It could be anything. But then it becomes a thing that's perceivable because there's a projection onto it. And so where does that projection, what is the nature of that image? Well, it's coming from film that's being projected. Okay, well, where'd the film come from? That's a good question. Because that answers the question of whether my partner is somebody who's amazing today, or someone who's just really grinding my gears today. And what the Yoga Sutra says is that there's a cause and there's an effect, right? So when we have klishta or aklishta, what's the difference between things that are making us suffer versus things that are giving us pleasure? Punya punya, punya punya. It's the good things that we do create things that are pleasant, and the bad things that we do create things that are unpleasant. So that's talking about a seed and a fruit, which Patanjali uses the word pala to describe. And he goes in depth of all the palas, all the fruits of keeping our yamas and niyamas, which is our ethical code of life. How do we walk in the world with grace? How do we walk in the world in a way that's creating something nice instead of something degenerative? And so if it's true cause and effect, then when we perceive the world, it'd be wise to realize that that is an effect. So then it's like if you see like a man hurting a dog on the movie screen, and you're like, that's wrong. That's a good reaction. So the first reaction you might have is to go punch the guy on the screen, which is what a lot of us are doing. There's an effect, and we're trying to change the effect, even though the effect has a cause that came beforehand. When you plant a seed, it takes time to become a fruit. And so we're often fighting our fruits instead of planting new seeds. So that's the first kind of wisdom that comes out of the prajna, the wisdom that comes as a function of samadhi, of a mind that's so still that it can see the unfolding of reality. It can catch the vritti. It can catch the image coming from the perceiver toward the object, making it the thing that it perceives. So then if the nature is empty and then the film is what's making that, then instead of being foolish and fighting the TV screen, we should be wise and change the film.
Mm.
And a good direction of what film to make, because Patanjali doesn't leave us hanging. He gives us 3 chances at a methodology of yoga. The first is Abhyasa Vairagya, which is a very simple idea of turn toward the things that bring us up and turn away from the things that bring us down, essentially. Then it gives us Kriya Yoga, tapas svadhyaya ishvara pranidhana, tapas, engage in spiritual hardship, which one of the hardest things we could ever do spiritually is to love someone who's hurting us, right? Because the pain that we're feeling right now from that person, the perception that we have of this person hurting me, that's because we have engaged in that in some kind of even minor way in our past, which is why we need ahimsa, because that's the opposite of seeing that film.
Mm.
Then we, in Tat Sanidao, in our presence, then all conflict comes to an end if we make ahimsa a way of life, pratishtayam. And so engaging in the world in that way is I think, really, really, in one way, it's terrifying because we have to take total radical responsibility for the weeds in our life, right? You can't blame the birds, man. You can't
Mhm.
blame, the person who didn't do their job yesterday pulling in the weeds. That weed is there because you made it a weed, because of your past actions, thoughts, and deeds, because karma is cause and effect. Karma is just, it's action. It's frames per second. It's the unfolding. Karma comes into the root of karma comes into the word create in English. Or like cereal, the thing that grows, or crescent moon, the part of the moon that we can see. And so our karma is this like CPU that's like chugging through frame by frame by frame, giving us this image, or GPU, this giving us the image of a reality. So we should recognize that and just change the film, and we have clues of what to do.
Great answer. That's a very well thought out response to my question. Man,
So
thank you, Bob.
in
Yeah.
meditation, one of the things that's really nice is the clarity, to be like, because here's the thing that's, I think, is like one of the coolest parts of a practice of yoga is, okay, I'm not being violent in my life. Good job. I didn't punch anybody today. And you're like, is it true that I wasn't violent today? You
Mm.
know, Obviously, grossly, I was not violent because I didn't punch anybody. I didn't kill anybody today. A lot of us can check that off our list. But did I even have a moment of violent thought where I saw someone fail and I rejoiced in their pain? Oof. Like I see some, I don't know, some
Mm.
popular person that I just don't agree with
Mhm.
my
Mhm.
perception of how they live in the world.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, good, they had it coming. I'm like, good, and I'm just like, that was ahimsa. That was not ahimsa. That was hinsa. That wasn't ahimsa. And so if I'm going so fast in my life, then I lose the nuance of the texture of my world.
Mm.
And if I can slow down and I can just really be an observer into the nuanced texture of my life, then I can catch subtleties that were not apparent to me. And then, because here's the pain, Todd, is that we think we're doing well, but we're actually still creating suffering. Like, Vitarka Vichara Nanda Asmita, there's these 4 kinds of meditations in the first chapter of the Yoga Sutra. And like Ananda is like when we get to a meditative state of bliss. And a lot of people are like, good, I did it. I'm in bliss. And
Mm.
he's like, you know, asmita, like there's still another level, right? And all of these are rupa nagumat, which means they all lead to forms of suffering still. So even if we're in a bliss, if we're not wise about this beautiful compassion that we're feeling, we're still in a subtle level of ignorance. We still think that that bliss is coming from its own side instead of understanding that that bliss is because I've served people in my past. And so we need to catch the truth of that because if we start to chase bliss, then that'll destroy us because we think that bliss is the thing, but it's not the thing. The bliss of, a pleasant meditation or a warm embrace with a loved one, we should use that to empower and invigorate us in our practice. So we need to use bliss for our liberation, but if we chase bliss, then we're only guaranteeing our destruction.
That makes perfect sense. And I can see that in my own life where I'll feel like I
Me
just
too.
got everything lined up the way that I thought I needed to line it up for me to be feeling really happy with everything.
Mm,
But something
yeah.
underneath all that just doesn't still feel right. And then so quickly it gets toppled and you're just like right back in
Mm,
that spot again of going, oh God, I got to realign everything. Let me realign everything. So I see what you're saying, like almost, you know, so then don't try to realign. And maybe when I use the word realign, I'm putting that down the thread of chasing bliss because
mm,
it's my hope of the realignment process. And when I say realign, like okay, coffee's in the maker. I'm gonna wake up. I'm gonna hit the switch. It'll be ready to
yeah.
go. I got that lined up, and then
Mhm.
I got everything lined up for success for the day. And I got my podcast with you lined up. I got and it's going really good today. Like some days,
Yeah.
my everything lined up, it's actually working. But I like what you're saying. Take a moment to even investigate that.
Yeah.
Is that really the recipe for success in yoga? Maybe there's more. There must
Mm,
be more. So take me a little
mm,
further here then. Is it a is it that complete letting go of aligning things up for my happiness that then that real true happiness might pop in? Or am I still in trouble? I still,
yeah. I think
what are you thinking these days? How are you feeling this?
well, Todd, have you done, so you're like, I did all the alignment,
Yeah.
and of course our asana is a reflection of every single conversation that we're having, right? So am I in good alignment, like with my coffee
Mm.
maker or my knee
Yes.
position, or whatever,
Yeah.
And there's been times when it's like, yeah, this is pleasant, good job, But has
Right.
there also been times when it's been unpleasant with the same exact alignment?
Yes.
So is alignment the cause of happiness?
No.
That's the
It,
virti that we're
yeah.
trying to nirodha.
Mm.
That's the virti that we're trying to stop. Thinking that happiness is in a thing, and if I consume the thing, then I'll be happy, which includes our schedule, which includes, our coffee maker, which includes, the beans that we. And so what we do is we're caught in this illusion that if we just put the puzzle pieces right, we got all the things, and there's 5 happiness units in this, and there's 6 happiness units in that, and then you make the puzzle, and then you get there, and you're like, still suffering. You're like, dang. And so that doesn't mean that we don't work for alignment, but what it means is that we we have to understand that those things could never be the cause. They're just the carrier. So like
Mm.
when we take care of other people, when we serve other people, which is the essence of, it's the path of yoga and the result of yoga, and it's the state of yoga is serving other beings to the highest of your potential most powerfully. And if we stay in that intention and we really try to do that, then everything else will fall into place. Then when we hear the method will work. So think of it like this: when we serve other people, we wrote ourselves a letter, and we said, that was nice, and we mail it. And then we're like, one day I'm gonna get that mail back. And then one day, now you've turned the coffee machine on, and the coffee machine is the mailman or the mail person. And the mail person's like, here's your letter. And you're like, yes, this is a pleasant experience. Good. It's not because of the coffee maker. It's
Hmm.
because of the things we've done previously. Or else, if that wasn't true, then every time we got that alignment, then the only option for that would be happiness. And the weed would only ever be a weed to every single being who perceived it because it has a nature of its own from its own side that everybody would objectively perceive equally. So we can't be too attached, but we still need to work with method because method is the delivery system for our own kindness.
Yeah, good. I see that because we don't want to just completely abandon,
No, you
and this is
can't.
where we obviously get into Bhagavad Gita theory in relation to how do I still align and work toward puzzle piecing, but without having any attachment to the outcome of the puzzle, which is
Yeah.
so challenging, is it? So
So,
imagine like you're what in a
mm.
moment, say, what is your response and or processes when that inner feeling of like, dang it?
Yeah, totally.
Do you then, it sounds like you might, or a strategy or our
Yeah.
yoga practice
Mhm.
could be and or is, how can I be of service? So maybe like I booked the wrong ticket for the airplane. I show up at the airport. I booked it for the wrong day. Oh, what do I do now? And
Mhm.
then if I remember, okay, this is just another attempt at me of aligning things that didn't work in my favor. I'm not happy right now,
Mm.
but could I in this moment right now still feel
Yeah.
at I'm at one? And then how can I be at service? How can I be of service right now? Like my mind goes to starting to then peruse the airport.
Mhm.
Where am I needed? Or I mean, probably the first thing I should focus on is like, okay, let's get the right ticket. Let's get the right ticket in order, you know? But I'm just curious then to take it to that next level,
Yeah.
how do you still operate, in function and then
Yeah.
arrive at your destination because, maybe you're scheduled to teach that teacher training and, you made a commitment. So
Yeah.
how do you
This sounds like a
yeah,
real story, Todd.
it is. I caught myself recently.
No, no.
It's like
Yeah,
I'm
yeah, yeah.
laughing at myself. Like, how did I book the wrong day? I mean, I thought
Yeah.
I imported the right. So I mean, but more on like
Yeah.
a strat.
Sure.
I
Absolutely. Yeah.
understand that because what you're saying though, and this is where we get caught in this little circular motion of vritti. Because then if I'm
Mhm.
I'm thinking, um, I'm looking for a solution. Am I still caught in this idea that if I find the solution, I'll then be happy? Do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
and that's where I get
So,
stuck,
and
you know?
yeah, and I think that's a really great extrapolation of that verti because we'll jump from one verti to another verti, and like you said, we're still in avidya, we're still in wrong view or incorrect vision. Um, so what we teach is we teach Navanga yoga. So not everyone, a lot of people know Ashtanga, which is eight. Ashta means eight, and then Anga means auxiliaries, limbs, branches. I like to teach it as links, eight links. You see Anga used as a link in a lot of the texts of that time. So we teach at the Yoga Studies Institute Navanga, which is the nine link method, and really it's the one link that's in the nine. And that ninth link is in the Yoga Sutra. We just wanted to make it extremely obvious and highlighted, and that's compassionate wisdom, which in our tradition is often referred to as the two wings that give a bird flight. So the first is, well, you can do either first, but in this very scenario, what I would think of first is the wisdom that understands the nature of reality, which I know sounds really crazy, but stay with me here. It's the wisdom that understands that the weed is a weed because you made it a weed, right? It's the wisdom that understands that the weed is actually empty of any weedness from its own side. And so what that does immediately is that it helps us realize that things are not fixed. So this crappy experience that I'm in right now, it's empty. of any nature of its own, which means it's open to any possibility in the next karmic opening. Because the
Mm,
way that we experience the world is frame
mm,
by frame by frame by frame by frame. It's not continuous. We put it together as a continuous thing, but it's actually one karma at a time is how we perceive it, which means the next, literally the next karma that opens, the next seed that we planted at some point in the time could come to fruit. And so what a yogi does is they get very, very, very skilled at influencing which are the seeds that ripen next. And we can do that through infinite amounts of methods. And that's why we have methods, so that we can try to coax forward the fruit that we would enjoy and stop planting the fruit that is really untasty. So the first thing is it true that this moment inherently is a bad moment? No. Doesn't necessarily make me not experience it as that way, but what it does is it softens it as a from a concrete thing to something that is impermanent. It's something that can change,
mhm.
because we get in our mind is like, this is awful, we get totally concretized on a thing being that thing, and no one could change our mind about it. So what we do first is we loosen. Okay, unverti, stop the verti. This moment isn't inherently bad. I can't tell you how many times something that I once perceived as bad ended up being absolutely perfect. And it was shame on me that I didn't have the fortitude of my practice to be in a space where I could hold that possibility in the moment when it was actually true.
Well said.
And so, when we're in our warrior two and we're like, please get me out of here, what we're doing is tapas. We're increasing our capacity to stay in a spiritual mode in a moment of heat and difficulty and hardship. And so we're training ourselves for this moment in the airport when we like, oh my gosh. And then you say, I just invested all of this prana, all of this energy into an awful scenario. So what I do next is I say, well, what are the other scenarios? Because I should have equanimity for the outcome. Like I should equally give life to the bad and the good. So now let me start to create different possibilities in my mind. Okay, now I'm feeling more relaxed. My nervous system is re-regulating, right? Because now I'm in a state of meditation instead of a state of pure agitation and anger. And then you can do any number of practices to bring. There's this really important Tibetan teaching that is essential. It's lung sam jukpa chikpa. Lung means prana, sem means mind, jukpa means to come together, chikpa means one. So it says that the mind and the prana come together as one. And that's the practice of the inner and the outer worlds coming together in union in the practice of yoga. So if you start to develop, and this is a little more advanced, but if you start to develop a relationship with the prana inside of you, the prana moving inside of your body must have a mental counterpart to it. So if we're having trouble changing our mind, then we can use the methodology of our body to influence how our mind is turning, because we are turning the mind, but let's try to make it aklishta, not bad, not unpleasant. So then from that place, you say, of all the infinite possibilities, what is the most wise and compassionate thing I can do now? So, okay, I understand the wisdom. Things are coming from their inside. They're empty in their nature and everything's changeable. So now compassion. What is the most beautiful thing that I could give to the world in this moment? Okay. So
Mm,
then you're like,
mm.
here's the cards I was dealt.
Yep.
Let me be of service.
Yes.
And what that might mean in your yoga teacher thing is, hey Todd, actually, what this was a teaching this morning is one of our yoga teachers, someone's like, how did you start teaching? And they said, I didn't have an option because my yoga teacher said, hey, I'm leaving and I need you to cover my classes. And he's like, I'm not ready. I'm not ready. And she goes, well, someone has to take care of my dog. And so she's like, I know you're not ready, but someone has to take care of my dog. And then that was the beginning of someone who's been teaching for, 30, 40 years and is a beautiful teacher.
Yes.
And so if we're so stuck in ourself of our own experience, asmita, like me, mine, I, woe is me. But what about that person? I'm like, hey, can you cover my class? You have no idea what goodness you may have inadvertently just created because that possibility exists too. Now, we can't be foolish, right? We can be compassionate and foolish at the same time. That's where it's really important to develop our wisdom so that we can have discernment and discrimination between being foolish and our it's like, oh, hey, that 6-year-old, go teach the class. Like, probably not a good idea. That's not very wise. So we have to have both of these
Yes.
things together, the compassion and the wisdom, because wisdom without compassion looks like what I experienced at university was we have solutions on a shelf, but no one's taking action. I have all this wisdom, but it's not coming to life. And we can have compassion without wisdom, which is I think I'm doing a good thing, but actually in reality, because of my own ignorance, I'm not. And that's a shame. And so when these two things come together, it becomes this thing that accelerates all of the benefits of our yoga practice. So what we teach is that if you do asana without compassionate wisdom, then any of the benefits that you experience, they're short term because what you're doing is you're eating fruit that was planted by seeds of the past, but you're not reinvesting. And in fact, if it's for self-cherishing, I'm only doing this so that I can look mega sexy because, that's cool or, whatever. Like, then that vanity is now the fruit that you're going to be eating next week or next month or next lifetime or what have you. And so if we're engaging with our yoga and we're saying, I am doing this for the sake of all beings, that is my motivation of compassion. I'm doing this so that I can be of highest service to all beings. And I understand that the emptiness of the posture is a real thing, which means the same shoulder stand that made me feel great yesterday could hurt me today because the pose is empty. It's a weed one day and it's a fruit the next day. There's
Mm.
no inherent reality to that posture or the teacher. I am the one who's putting it there. So let me intentionally put something beautiful and pure in that empty space so that I get to eat that fruit.
Isn't that amazing, Bob, that you and I and everyone listening could have done a shoulder stand a million times, or let's say 365 times, like over a year. And then at some point, this sort of realization will come. You know what I mean? Like, because we see how we could be practicing a pose
Yeah.
and just practicing it because someone told me to practice it because I went to the class and they said go into shoulder stand. So I went into shoulder stand and I'm breathing in my shoulder stand and the understanding of what you're presenting and what you're presenting is what you've learned from other people who have had this realization. So I understand that what you're saying is like this isn't just me coming up with this idea. This is like this is wisdom that has been passed down for eons that then one day all of a sudden we're going to realize that this shoulder stand, and you start going deep into it and start going
Yeah.
deep into this philosophy and starting to really, what am I doing and why am I in a shoulder stand? And
Why is it
is
this way? Why
yeah.
is it?
And
Yeah.
how is shoulder stand going to bring me the peace and happiness? But then maybe if I start to implement a little more of this structure or methodology, or like you said, this ninth piece into this eight, previously eight, now have another little piece to add in
Yeah.
compassionate wisdom.
Mhm.
And I like how you brought in the idea of I could have an idea that I want to ask somebody to teach, but instead of choosing the 6-year-old that's never come into the space before, I'm going to pick the person that's right in front of me, even though the wisdom piece. And then boom, all of a sudden I'm in shoulder stand and
Yes.
here it is.
And
I
you have a
yeah.
realization. Yeah.
Uh-huh. Isn't that incredible though that it
Yeah.
could be 365 times before this 366th is the one? And I know there's no set number of the amount of shoulder stands one would do before that moment would arrive, but it does make sense to me that the teaching does say just continue to practice over a long period of time because when the student comes up to you and says, well, how long is it going to take? I've been doing it for like, when am I going to, I want to have that moment you were talking about in Costa Rica where you had that state of meditation and then you were trying to figure out like what just happened and then the rest of your life is like going back to like, how do I get there? Um, I find all of this so fascinating. I love the connection with the earth and nature and reality of yoga being all one. And so it makes sense to me. Like I remember when I first started having this realization of like, all this gardening work is really just an external
Mm,
exhibition of the yoga practice now that I'm embarking on. And when that connection was made for me of like what this all fits together so perfectly, all the analogies and all the but that's no real big wonder or mystery because we are living in the world as a part of the creation, as a part of nature, as and hopefully at some level at one with this, as opposed to seeing ourselves separated. That me gardening on the inside and on the outside is really all just me gardening. And we could call our yoga practice gardening practice, and we could call our gardening practice yoga practice. And where does that separate and where does it intersect? And man, I mean, you're right. The solutions are all right here. Like, we don't really need to start doing more experiments and more research and more. It's right in front of us. So I think it's time, instead of asking the question, how come we're not coming to that real, you know what I mean? Maybe it is right now. We are planting a seed. We are consciously planting the seed by having this conversation because, and I like the idea of understanding like I could plant a seed now and it might come to fruition 15 years from now. But then maybe as a yogi slash meditation practitioner slash just human slash am I a human? But we won't go right there right now. That I could plant the seed right now and boom, here it is. It's fruited or it's come to fruition. Like that and I love your frame by frame reference. I mean,
mm.
everything you're saying, like I come across it, but I'm feeling its aliveness right now. Like I feel like you're bringing it to life in a way that I can really, I'm just excited. And I sometimes typically my next question would be, Bob, what do you see for the future? Bob, what do you want to do for, and I see how futile that question really is because does that really matter? Like us projecting the future, our future
Mm,
fruit, our future ripening of fruit that can come
yeah,
out of this conversation, I think it's already right here, right now. Like we're getting a taste of it right now.
yeah.
Do you feel the same? Do you agree? Or do
Yeah, I'd love to riff on that just for a moment,
please,
and
please,
I know
please.
we're coming up on time here.
My gosh, it's been, how long has it been? Holy
I don't know, but I'm having a
dude,
blast.
we're at an hour and 15. I haven't even looked. You're right.
Oh,
I try to keep them to an hour.
we
We would
exited
just go
time.
all day long. I really
So
do want to publish an 8 hour podcast. I don't know how many people would embark on listening to the 8 hour podcast. Most people's attention span, but I feel like we could do this, Bob. But you're right. Let's make this the
yeah.
final riff. But I want to hear everything you have to say. So don't feel like you have to hurry.
So I think a lot of things are a pendulum, where uh we're like all the way over here, we're all the way, but most often, and I think in fact always it's the middle way. And so this idea of projecting future, it's not inherently bad to do that because there's no inherent reality to anything, right? So it's more about how we're approaching it. Are we approaching this activity with compassionate wisdom? That's what gives it its flavor. That's what determines whether it's a cause of suffering or a cause of liberation. And so I think it's really important to have a vision. I think it's really important to have a vision because the vision I have is a world that's free of suffering. That's an important vision, I think. It's the vision that is the horsepower that drives me in my practice. But here's where it gets really fun is like you were saying, collapsing that time gap. That's a real thing. And there's a couple different ways that people can talk about that. And I think it really depends on who's listening as to how you would share something like that. But the way I feel inspired to talk about that now that was really radical in my practice was the joy of doing something beautiful in the world exists totally in this present moment before the fruit. The 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 activity of wholeheartedly living your true beliefs is the fruit. Like there's nothing better than to live totally integrated and with with compassionate wisdom, was the language I would use. And then, yes, you will get a fruit from that. And how long till you have, it's impossible to tie one exact effect to one exact cause. Like you'd have to be omniscient, which is a goal, but so it's impossible to say, oh, this was from that thing. But I think that there is a total liberation of the attachment to result by understanding that there's bliss in the cause.
Ooh,
So
yes.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And so it's like I am who I believe I
Yeah.
should be. I believe that I'm embodying my swarupa, my true self. And that is its total and whole reward.
I get it. I think you communicated that clearly. I can follow everything you're saying. It's not easy to do. Did a great job, Bob.
Well, thanks for holding this space, Todd.
An incredible pleasure. I know, man. Gosh. Well, we'll
It's
do it
nice to be
again. We'll
here.
do it again. So we'll break it into like instead of one 8 hour chunk, we'll do eight. We'll do nine. Let's do nine. Let's
Yes.
go for the Navang. Is it Navanga?
Nava, yeah. So it's Nava and Anga. So the two A's in Sanskrit become a long A. So Navanga.
Let's make this the first of nine. By the time we get to the ninth one, too, the world's gonna be a different place.
Yeah.
It's gonna be a
So
different.
so what do I see? I see hope. I really do.
Yeah, I do
Because
too.
one of the classic ending debates that at least is in my lineage is the realization or the belief that the causes of liberation are more powerful than the causes of suffering. And so, of course, there will be that, like we are suffering so much, but we are also, through our practice, changing the world, and that's a more powerful cause. So it will eventually, given the prospect of infinity, it will win.
Dude, I love it. Oh my
Anyway,
gosh, Bob.
optimism is healthy, I think, from time to time,
Yeah,
as long as it's with wisdom.
I agree with you. I agree with you. And then if it's our choice, that's what I'm going to choose. Thank you, Bob.
Thank you, Todd. It was such a pleasure. So, Todd, if I may, I'd love to give a sign off that I do for everything with spiritual warriors, which is may you live fearlessly on purpose. Thanks, Todd.
Thank you so much, Bob. Thank you. We'll pick it up here next time.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye bye for now.